they're just people who are really bad at talking about their feelings and be vulnerable and indulge in intimacy. And like, I was like, wow, that's just like me. I was gagging and not in the fun gay way. I've been reading so much fanfiction about Sid Carmi, like, it's a bit unhealthy actually. Of course, it's an English guy who is doing the art trafficking, maybe getting queer baited a little bit. Hey, Happy New Year! Welcome back to my channel. I'm Léna, and today we're talking about my 2023 favorites. First of all, a little bit of housekeeping channel update. I'm not gonna bore you with all of my resolutions, but I do want to talk more about like how this channel will kind of pan out for the rest of the year. There's a few changes coming. I think this has been mostly a book channel since it began, but I really want to kind of branch out. You'll see in this video I've grown really like obsessed about topics that are not books, and I've really wanted to talk about them on my platform, but I just want to be more present on YouTube, and that means opening myself up to talking about things like movies and music and things that aren't books. And I will still do book videos. Like, obviously I have like a year ranking video planned and like some rants coming, and I don't know, I still have a lot of fun with books and book content, but I realized that I also read 20 books a year, and I'm a slow reader, I'm a mood reader, and it's not really sustainable to expect myself to make regular videos only about books. And because I want to be more present and because I want to be more consistent, I've decided to kind of expand the scope of the things I talk about on this channel and really share my appreciation of media beyond books. Like I said, I've kind of reconciled myself with being a slow reader and a person who cannot stick to a TBR. Like, I've had TBR, like thematic TBRs for several years. Like, I'm just kind of slow. And I think this acceptance of myself has helped shift my media mindset away from a quantity mindset to a more quality mindset, which leads me to my first favorite of 2023, which is giving up star ratings. So star ratings in general, I feel, are controversial. I feel like every year or so we have like a debate on book Twitter, like, what does it mean to give 3 stars? Is a 3-star book a bad book? And I just realized that they're not really doing what they're supposed to do. Like, instead of clearly communicating how you feel about a certain book, they just add to the confusion. Like, some people think 3 stars means that it's a flop, and some people think 3 stars is like a really good, solid book. Even for myself, internally, I don't even know why 2 books that I feel very differently about are the same rating. It wasn't really a conscious decision at first. Like, I just kept putting off the star ratings because I realized that every time I do it right after reading the book, I give a kind of extreme rating, like either super high or super low. I wanted to think about it more and be more thoughtful in my ratings. Then I realized, like, I don't even need to rate anything. It doesn't change anything from my experience of the book or how I interact with other readers about it. Like, the rating itself is just symbolic at the end of it. And it's not as interesting as like discussing how it made me feel or like the story mechanism, the character development, the themes and subtext. Like, it's already hard enough to express these kind of things with words. So like, why should I make it harder for myself by simply using a 5-point scale, you know? I've stopped using them, which has completely taken off the pressure of judging books. Like, it felt like I had to have a final judgment on a book, and I'm just not very interested in that. And just, I've become maybe a bit more adventurous with books because I'm not like, oh, like, will this be a 5-star read? Like, it's become more about like exploring my tastes and figuring out what I like. Maybe I will go back to star ratings. Like, sometimes you read a book and it's so shit and it's like, this is half a star, this is a 1-star book. But for now, this is what suits my brain. Now, my second favorite of the year is, I guess, also another controversial topic, and it's the comeback of the bad bisexual in media. And ironically, I am so obsessed with this. Like, it feels like a trend that's so 90s revival, but I'm loving the kind of twist that's been put on it. I feel like we had a whole moment of representation politics where it felt like queer characters had to adhere to like impossible standards of respectability, especially queer women and bisexual women. And it's not completely gone from media. Like, I still see that kind of criticism, but I'm actually excited for the crop of really like interesting and controversial stories about queer women and kind of like bisexual sluts. I don't know, there's something compelling about a narrative that kind of revels in this trope, not out of bigotry or like hatred for bisexual people and their experiences, but that kind of use this trope to examine how bisexuals are viewed by society. Like, I don't know, in Anatomy of a Fall, the main character is suspected of having killed her husband, partly because she's bisexual, and so the choice of making her like a bisexual person who has like this kind of sexual appetite and who isn't necessarily like the perfect monogamous person is very intentional, and it really enhances the storytelling. Or even in conversations with friends, like Frances's bisexuality is never treated as something that defines her and her relationships, or even something that is the source of her bad decisions and her confusions or fears. Like, it is part of her flawed identity and her trying to learn how to navigate through what it is like to have actual adult relationships. But it's not like, oh, she like cheats because she's bisexual, you know? And even if it was that, like, there's something a little bit more relatable about bisexuals who like cheat and lie and steal and murder and are so insecure and unstable in their identities that it feels like they're more human, like they really inhabit the fluidity of humanity rather than be like perfect like models of what an acceptable bisexual is supposed to be. Especially when you feel like deep down there is no acceptable version of a bisexual. Like, the sexual fluidity of bisexuality is seen as, please do not take a shot every time I say bisexuality is seen as something that's the new norm, like, oh, sexuality is fluid, blah, 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 while remaining a bit too unstable to really fit into this heteropatriarchal society. Like, it's not so much that these characters are ideals or like especially subversive, but the fact that they're bad people, that they're duplicitous, is kind of a loophole, or I guess like a threat to traditional values. Bisexuals are falsely accepted into the heteronormative order, like if they're monogamously partnered with someone of the opposite sex, but deep down they're still treated, if not by their partners, at least by society, with suspicion. And I guess the way this trope is deployed really shows this false acceptance. It shows that bisexuality is something that can actually subvert or trouble this neat order. So that's a really interesting evolution. Also, not just in the use of this trope, but in the public reception of it. I feel like a few years ago, there would have been more outcry about the use of these tropes as biphobic, but I think more queer people, at least in my bubble, embrace these characters as fleshed out and meaty and like characters that are interesting to dig into. But also, I guess there's just entertainment value in seeing people like you like fuck shit up and get what they want at the expense of other people. I don't know, like it's kind of cathartic. It's cathartic, I don't know. My next favorite thing is romanticizing emails. It's kind of funny because I'm actually an email hater. Like, I hate emails in general, but because of Sally Rooney, I feel like there's a broader growing trend of people launching newsletters and also of email having a place, being a place of building romance and connection with people. And I'm kind of digging it. Like, I think it's kind of a backlash around the quickening of the pace of trend cycles and like social media feeds that refresh all the time with brand new information, and a return towards like slowness, or at least a more deliberate way of consuming information, and also bringing back this element of non-algorithmic curation. There is a slowness to it that is very compelling, and email can be hell. Like, I've been refreshing my inbox like crazy, just waiting to hear from like jobs, because I've been applying to jobs. And I like the idea of getting an insightful, well-researched, smart take in my inbox just to like relieve myself of the existential dread of waiting to hear from a job. And I think, yeah, email can be kind of romantic and like kind of semi-formal way of keeping up with friends without risking being gripped by the never-ending scroll of social media and stuff like that. Like, I don't know, it's just sweet. And I've learned a lot from newsletters. Like, my skin was saved from retinol thanks to a newsletter. So that counts for something. Okay, another favorite of the year that I have to mention, because I got into it right at the end of the year, and that obsessive period of my life will never be immortalized in a Spotify Wrapped, because they stop counting 31st of October and they never account for November, December. That's too much context, but my next favorite is Fiona Apple's first album, Tidal. And yes, it came out in 1996, and it's a fucking masterpiece. Like, it's so good. And I know you're gonna be like, how are you just hearing about this now? Like, aren't you a Mitski fan? Like, shouldn't you know your foremothers? Well, you wouldn't believe that I first got into Fiona Apple because I heard a Jersey Club remix of The First Taste on TikTok.
Long legs, I feel that I'm finally growing weary of waiting to be consumed by you. Give me a taste.
And now I'm like a super mega fan. I knew of her, but I didn't really get what she was doing or her music. But now I get it. Like, I truly get it, I think. I just love how much story she packs into her songs, like her songwriting, but also the lush production, the instrumentals that pull from so many different influences. Like, it's more jazzy, it's more rock inspired, pop inspired. Sometimes there's some like oriental flourishes. Like, sometimes it sounds like show tunes. Like, when I listen to her music, I feel like I'm a character in a Broadway show having her big statement song, and like I will kill a man by the end of the show. There's so much to what she does, and her music feels so warm. Like, I don't know, it's not really like fluff, like warm fluff, because there's kind of a core of loneliness and a longing for connection and love, but it feels warm because it feels timeless and like it's part of such a line and a legacy of women expressing deep, complex feelings in song. I hear so many of her influence in artists that I love, like in Lord's songwriting, in Mitski, and in Florence and the Machine. Like, I just love that I just now got into an album that was released in 1996, and I feel like I've been introduced into a community of people who just get it. It's just been a great experience, and I'm super excited to dive deeper into her discography. So, okay, now we're getting into the tops. I'm gonna give my top 3 books of the year. They're all by female authors, and even if they are pretty different, I feel like there's a through line between these books. There's something about history or the past or characters who transition from one life to another. There's something. The first book I want to talk about is Biography of X by Catherine Lacey. I got it as an advanced reader copy thanks to NetGalley, and it completely scrambled my brain. Like, my god. It's kind of a dense and mysterious book. The story like slowly unpeels layers of meaning and like, okay, you're following a journalist who's trying to retrace the life of her deceased wife by writing her biography. And so Biography of X is a novel, but it's written like a biography and it uses a lot of the codes of nonfiction. The wife is called X. She was an internationally known performance artist with kind of a mysterious past. She had like many alter egos and pseudonyms and fake identities. And then later in her life, she settled on X as a name. Through her wife trying to retrace her life, you start to realize that this novel is not set in our historical reality. It's set in the alternate reality of the United States, where some states seceded and formed a theocratic authoritarian government, and the rest of the states basically became a social democracy, kind of like Nordic countries, but even more socialist. It becomes not only a story of unpacking X's art and contributions and her relationship with her peers and her wife, but also unpacking that invented history of the United States and creating a whole new second half of the 20th century. And it also weaves in known figures of art and entertainment and criticism of our 20th century, like Susan Sontag and like 70s Italian feminists and David Bowie. It's so fascinating and so playful and smart. It uses the shape of the biography so well, like it has annotations on 2 layers, the in-story annotations and the real-world annotations. And it's just a great piece of fiction and history, and I was just mind blown reading it, and I've been recommending it to everyone. I definitely think I want to buy a hardcover copy, like I've been trying to find one secondhand, so if you see one, I'm down. The second book I want to talk about is Beautiful World, Where Are You by Sally Rooney, which completely reconciled her with me after I found Normal People a very lukewarm read, but that's for another video. It's basically a series of email exchanges between 2 friends, one who lives in Dublin working an underpaid publishing job, and the other who's like a career novelist who had kind of a psychological breakdown and exiled herself in a small seaside Irish town. And both of them kind of have difficult or like, I guess, typical of millennial women dating lives. Like the novelist just started dating a local man, and the Dublin friend is getting over her ex, but also kind of in love with her childhood friend who is like this very tall and socialist and Catholic man. I really love that book. I read it over the summer, and it was both casual but also quite ambitious. It kind of reads like a summer romance with dual point of view, but the dual point of views are 2 friends instead of the main character and the love interest. I think it's the most outrightly romantic and basic, maybe, novel of Sally Rooney, while the most explicitly political. Like it talks about sex and God and politics and friendship, and just like I identified so much with these characters. Like they're trying to navigate work, they're trying to navigate adulthood and relationships, and just trying to uphold their leftist values while still being cogs in the capitalist machine. I don't know, they're just people who are really bad at talking about their feelings and be vulnerable and indulge in intimacy. And like I was like, wow, that's just like me. And I feel like confessing you identify with Sally Rooney characters is kind of a double-edged sword, because you could totally get it and you could be like, this bitch is insufferable, and I would forgive you because I get it. Like as I was reading it, I was like, she's so annoying, like they're so annoying, but this is literally my life, you know. Not literally, I'm not a successful novelist, but you get my drift. To me, it really depicts so well being at this junction between like political awareness and a sense of powerlessness that you can feel sometimes when you're in the capitalist system, that can be especially paralyzing. But it also talks about like the guilt of having a certain degree of privilege, whether it's inherited or that you've gained through like work or education, and like the cognitive dissonance of trying to thrive in a capitalist society that's fundamentally a sick society. It's so interesting because it's not cynical, like unlike Normal People, which to me was especially cynical and cruel. It has the more traditional like happy ending of a Sally Rooney novel. I feel like as an author, Sally Rooney has shed some kind of cynicism about the nature of relationships, which I perceive to be very strong in Normal People, and which alienated me from the read. And here in Beautiful World, Where Are You, there was a sense of hope and that there was something worth fighting for, which is something that I really needed politically, like especially right now when our societies, I mean, just to talk about where I live, like France is rapidly radicalizing towards the right end of the political spectrum, and there is a strong fascization of society. Like in a lot of Western societies, solidarity with Palestinian people is considered like suspect and even criminal. And when you read a book that kind of touches on all these questions of like our responsibilities as Westerners in like a geopolitical context, etc., with people who still manage to create like worthy lives outside of that. It kind of gives you a renewed like sense of, it kind of makes it worth it. Like, if you don't even believe that you in your privileged life have a life worth living and fighting for, like, what would it be for people who have even less than you, who don't even have like a roof over their head, you know? Like, I don't know, I'm getting like really emotional talking about this, but like, I thought it was rare to see optimism in a leftist work, because I know that Tyrone is a Marxist, and I know that she's like been following the BDS movement, etc. So like, I feel like I'm not just projecting my own political like malaise onto her, but I really do feel like she gets that the current political moment is not one of despair and cynicism, but really one of hope. And yes, it was published in 2021, but it really is a book for the 2020s. Like, yeah, she gets it. Like, it was so good. And finally, the last book I want to talk about is The Years by Ernaux. So she's basically one of the most important leftist and feminist French authors of the 20th century. So of course, she had to get a Nobel Prize for me to finally start reading her. But it's never too late. It's never too late. I think I talked about her work briefly early last year. She is the personal essay blueprint. Like, she writes from her experience as someone who grew up in rural Normandy in a proletarian household, and through education achieved social mobility and status, but not with the kind of like, I can do it, then you can do it too, pick up your bootstraps, but more with a critical eye towards her new class and really suspicion towards signs of embourgeoisement. Like, I don't know really how to translate it, but Google tells me that the translation is gentrification, but I think it's more like a gentrification of the self or of the habits. I read 4 of her books this year, but my favorite was Les Années, or The Years. She basically weaves in a narrative that has historical moments, pop culture images, and her personal history, starting from her birth in 1940 to about 2008. That book to me is the embodiment of the personal is political. She talks about her upbringing, her first year studying outside of her class, her discovery of writing and radical politics, her illegal abortion in the 60s, her divorce, her kids, her affairs, her action or inaction in some of France's biggest political movements. It's a story about the second half of the 20th century in France, but it's also the story of a woman within that more global movement. Like, to me, it was touching because it's kind of a history lesson, but it also, in the best way, helps us make sense of the present, like the current political trends, the backlash against feminist ideals, the fascization of political life. Like, none of these things are issues that we haven't faced before. And of course, there's always a new context, but the mechanisms remain the same. And so it feels kind of bittersweet because these are battles and struggles that we've had before, and so nothing is new. But that means that we can fight them again and we can gain the upper hand again. Once again, I think the through line between these stories is the idea of like hope, of political change, of building things in the future. These were my top books of 2023. 2023 was also a great year for movies. Like, my god, what a year. Maybe it's also because it's the year that I finally got into really watching movies. Like, I got an unlimited movie pass for Christmas, and it completely changed my life. I think I went to the cinema more than I watched movies on Netflix. I don't think I could live without movies now. And it was already one of my comfort places, like something I went to like when I was feeling down and stuff. But now it's not just like emotional regulation, it's like part of my routine. I feel like I've gained so much new knowledge and appreciation of movies. I've watched older movies, I started watching like short films and stuff. But I'm just gonna talk about some of my favorites. One of the last one that I saw was Vermine, or Infested. It's a French horror movie about a guy who lives in the projects and brings home an exotic spider, and he basically accidentally kickstarts a man-eating spider infestation. in his building. So he and his friends and his sister try to save themselves and the other people in the building while dealing with the very unhelpful police. It's so good. It's like so thrilling, so smart, so funny. It's like, it looks so good, and the VFX, it's great. Like, it's been such a good year for French genre movies, like between this, The Animal Kingdom, Mars Express, like especially genre movies that have things to say on a societal level. They don't half-ass the genre half, you know, like it was a true creature feature. Like those spiders are gnarly. I was gagging and not in the fun gay way, like viscerally reacting. Like the couple in front of me in the theater, they would laugh every time I was like audibly getting scared in the theater. It's good. Like it's like a good horror movie, and as all good horror movies do, it also has an element of like social critique and environment critique. Like it really like talks about the abandonment of social housing in the Paris suburbs and like the daily lives of the mostly Black and Arab population of this kind of housing, and the suspicion toward them and how they're subjected to police violence, and how it really makes the parallels between like how the spiders are treated and how they become, all of them, like the spiders and the people, victims of a kind of ecological disaster. And like this works on so many levels. Like it's so good. And also the lead actor is a Scam Friends alumni. It was filmed like not too far from where I live, so it was just like, I don't know, it's good to see French cinema do something that's a bit outside of the like typical scope, and that's like a social drama but kind of has fun with it and does something original with it. Another one of my favorite movies of the year is La Chimera by Alice Rohrwacher. I took 2 years of Italian to be able to say that name. It's an Italian film set in the 80s, at the time during which there were tomb raiders, like literal tomb raiders, and they would go into Etruscan gravesites to find artifacts to sell to international art traffickers. And so we follow this one English guy named Arthur, because of course it's an English guy who is doing the art trafficking, and he's played by Josh O'Connor, and he has this kind of gift for finding tombs and gravesites. Like he goes into a trance and points at the ground, is like, yeah, it's right there. It's so good. Like Josh O'Connor in that movie, like I didn't get it when he was playing Prince Charles, because I can't do royalty. Like I'm so sorry, but it's not for me. But in this movie, he's so dirty, he's so pathetic and sad, and he's such a desolate man, and I'm entranced by him in this role. He plays this kind of love-lorn character who's looking for his lost love, and he speaks Italian, which is so good. Beyond that, the directing style is so lovely. Like the direction is super dreamlike and poetic, and the light falls on everything in a way that's so beautiful. I mean, it's the Italian countryside, like of course it's going to be beautiful, but everything around it is great as well. Like there's 80s set design and costuming, and the music is so good, and the director experiments with different film formats, and even like the cast, like the ensemble cast around Josh O'Connor is mostly like amateur like actors, and you don't feel that. It's like it feels so organic and kinetic, and it's always moving, and it's so good. Not only is it so good visually, but it also says a lot, I think, about our relationship to the past and history and the sacred. Like, I don't know, it really touched me in that way. I don't know if it's still playing in cinemas, but if you can see it on the big screen, like, please do so, because it's so good. It's just like a complete feast for the eyes and the soul. Next movie I want to talk about is Anatomy of a Fall, which I've mentioned a bit earlier, and also won 2 Golden Globes. One for scenario, like, So yeah, it's a French courtroom drama about Sandra. She's a German novelist who lives in the French Alps with her husband, her son who is blind, and their dog. One day the husband is found dead, but no one knows if he killed himself or if he was killed. And so she becomes obviously the primary suspect. So we basically follow her trial and how, by trying to prove her innocence or her guilt, the lawyers kind of end up excavating all the dirty details of her marriage, their fights, their difficulties, their resentment, etc. And we see how every part of their lives is dissected, not just to try to reveal the truth of what happened, but really to try to create the most compelling narrative for the jury. It's really about the theater of courts and justice, and also the pitfalls of the French justice system. Like, they inevitably kind of mirror the prejudices of French society. And it's such a powerful and ambitious film, but I think it's still accessible, especially if you're intimidated by foreign films, because Sandra, the main character, is German. She speaks French, but she also speaks English. It's a lot of English dialogue, it's kind of accessible, and I think it plays a little bit with the conventions of like true crime, which makes sense because Justine Triet, the director, comes from a documentary background. It's really, really a good movie, and I think it goes really well with another like internationally acclaimed courtroom French drama called Saint-Omer by Alice Diop, which is also about a foreign woman on trial for crimes that kind of pertain to the domestic sphere. And there is so much to say about these two movies, but I don't have time to get into it now. But if you can see them, like, really, they're so great, and I love like getting to support women filmmakers. Then I will give my like quick-fire special mentions. I really like Asteroid City for being the movie that finally got me into Wes Anderson. I didn't know that him going fully meta would do it for me, but he made a movie about like what it is to deal with grief and like the pains of creating something worthwhile, and it was just quirky and like full of heart, and I liked it. I want to mention a few TV show favorites as well. I watched a lot of K-dramas, but I especially loved Little Women, not to confuse it with the adaptation of the Louisa May Alcott story. It's kind of a mob, it's a crime mob kind of story, and it was so much fun seeing women at the heart of thrillers and pulling strings and getting away with shit. Like, yeah, I really love Beef, which was a surprise because I didn't think they could pull off a 10-episode show about road rage, but they did. They really did. I also loved Blue Eye Samurai. It's an adult animated show. It's so gorgeous. The characters are so complex and layered, and like, it's set in medieval Japan when it was closed to foreigners, and it follows this character who was born of like a white father and a Japanese mother, and who is on the quest for revenge. And if you love beautifully choreographed fights and like gender ambiguity, like maybe getting queer-baited a little bit, this is for you. It's on Netflix, so you have no excuse not to watch it. Of course, I love season 2 of The Bear. I have the biggest crush of all time on Ayo Edebiri. Like, it's actually embarrassing. My friends are always sending me videos of her, like, yeah, that's my soulmate. But I can't wait for season 3. Yeah, I love that so much. Like, Sydney Adamu is my favorite character of all time. And I can't wait for season 3 and maybe To Be Destroyed by Sid Carmi or not. I've been reading so much fanfiction about Sid Carmi. Like, it's a bit unhealthy, actually. And then I'm going to talk about my last favorite of the year. Maybe the one that changed my life the most. And I'm not like preaching about that. Like, I'm just want to share my experience. Because I feel like sometimes when you talk about it, it sounds like preaching. But my favorite of the year is journaling. And especially morning pages, as talked about in The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron. I always had a diary, like pretty much since I learned how to write. But it was more something that I use in moments of crisis to either dig myself deeper into a hole of my own unhealthy emotions, or like, I don't know, it was never a daily practice. And this year, I finally started daily journaling, and it's such a transformation. Like, with a few friends, we started a book club for The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron, and it's a 12-week program to kind of like get your creative spark back. I feel like every other YouTuber is doing it. One of the things you do on the program is to write 3 pages daily of stream of consciousness, like literally every morning as you jump out of bed. I'm someone who's very skeptical of like self-help, and I don't like the capitalist, realist, bootstrappy rhetoric that they use. I feel like most self-help books, what they teach you, you could learn from any off-the-shelf YA book. Like, any coming-of-age fictional story has the same teachings. Usually, I don't like that kind of literature. It's kind of scammy, but The Artist's Way feels different because It's really about reconnecting with the parts of you that have been grinded by the like constant search for productivity and profits, basically. And reconnecting with the parts of you that want to create and having this non-judgmental approach to yourself. It's really helped me create intimacy with myself and self-trust and self-compassion. I think it's given me confidence to do things that I don't think I would have done 6 months ago. Like, I was already a pretty independent person and like kind of driven, but I had a lot of shame to shed around like wanting something and going for it because I grew up Catholic. But I don't know, I really do feel like myself more than ever before. I feel like I know myself and it's easier to make decisions. And I don't know, I think like jobs and academia can help end up swallowing you whole. Like, I spent almost 7 years in higher education. Like, what is an identity when you're not giving in papers and doing internships and stuff, you know? But having this practice of every day writing out my thoughts, no matter how dumb or spiteful or angry, really helped me see how much of my life extends past this fear. In a way, this practice has made it possible for me to even make this video today. Like, talk openly about what I really loved and not giving up YouTube, even if it can be hard and it can be hard to be consistent and you feel like if you're not doing it all the time, why do it at all? And even like finding your place in a community online can be hard, and finding like what you do actually brings something to other people, and it's not just like self-indulgent drivel. Like, I'm getting too deep into it, but you know what I mean? Like, journaling has just helped me do things for their own sake and not necessarily because they're gonna bring me something like a degree or a job or something. But yeah, that were my 2023 favorites. If you've made it this far in the video, thank you so much. You're officially part of my online community. Let me know in the comments what were some of your 2023 favorites. Maybe they will become mine in 2024. Maybe some of mine will become yours and we'll do like a favorite swap. Happy New Year once again. Thank you for watching and I'll see you in the next one. Bye! Happy New Year, y'all. Y'all, why did I say y'all?